They were icons of cinema's golden age, stars with charm, mystery, and unmatched allure. But behind the lights and glamour, some of them harbored secrets that would never make it to the silver screen. Not scandals or crimes, but private desires so strange, so specific, they could completely shift how you see these legendary names. What if the personas they showed the world were hiding deeply personal obsessions no one ever expected? Stay tuned, because what you are about to discover may change the way you see these stars forever. On paper, Howard Hughes was the ultimate success story. A billionaire, a film producer, an aviation genius, his legacy seemed unstoppable. But behind those sharp suits and Hollywood deals was a man trapped by obsession. Hughes's fear of germs was no ordinary phobia. It consumed him. He would isolate himself for months at a time, using tissues to touch even the most basic objects. He labeled everything in his home according to its contamination level. Towels, forks, doorknobs, each came with handwritten instructions for use. He made his romantic partners trim their nails to exact lengths. Some were even asked to scrub their skin raw before entering his space. To outsiders, this looked like classic obsessive-compulsive behavior, but several close associates later hinted at something more. Hughes seemed not just scared, but oddly fixated. Hygiene rituals became elaborate performances. Some speculated these routines gave him a kind of control, or even pleasure. In private notes uncovered after his death, Hughes described cleanliness in strangely intimate language. One journal entry called a woman's freshly scrubbed hands perfectly erotic. His obsession bled into how he treated others, directing staff to follow bizarre hygiene protocols not out of fear, but desire. And perhaps most bizarre? Some women found themselves drawn to his control. They played along with the rituals, not realizing they were part of something more than just fear, a hidden world of power, submission, and fetish that no one at the time dared to name. But Hughes was only the beginning. The next star kept a secret that was visible in every scene, if you knew where to look. Ava Gardner was the definition of screen seduction, sultry, confident, and untouchable. She moved through Hollywood like a flame, beautiful, dangerous, and never still. But her most guarded secret was not in her performance, her lovers, or her scandals. It was written on her body. Ava Gardner had tattoos, hidden, intimate, and carefully placed where only her closest partners would ever see them. In an era when tattoos were rare for women and practically taboo for actresses, Ava quietly collected them. Each one had meaning. Some were symbols of trust, others were tied to personal milestones, and all of them were strategically concealed beneath the costumes, gowns, and elegance that the cameras adored. Few ever knew. She never mentioned them in interviews. They were never photographed, but whispers leaked through ex-lovers and biographers, descriptions of small, delicate inkings on her inner thigh, along her ribs, and near her hip. Nothing loud, nothing flamboyant, just secrets, printed in ink. One former confidant described a moment where Ava traced a line of script across her waist and whispered, "That one is for when I stopped being afraid." Another source claimed she had a small anchor etched near her pelvis, a symbol of stability during years of chaos. The tattoos were not for rebellion, they were for control. For Ava, they were markers of identity in an industry that demanded she be everything except herself. The ink was private, uncompromised, real, and perhaps most telling of all, she only revealed them when trust was absolute, not just to lovers, but to those she believed would never use the knowledge against her. It was a form of selective vulnerability, turned erotic by secrecy. When a friend once asked her why she got them, Ava reportedly replied, "Because no one can direct what you hide." They were her final power play, permanent, silent, and deeply personal. In the golden glow of old Hollywood, perfection was performance. But beneath the tailored suits and flawless gowns lived obsessions no camera ever captured. These were not just quirks, they were confessions, stitched into fabric, hidden in drawers, inked on skin, waiting to be uncovered by those who dared to look closer. To the world, Cary Grant was elegance in human form, effortlessly suave, endlessly charming. But behind the polished persona was a private fixation few ever suspected, a quiet but persistent obsession with women's feet. During the filming of Houseboat in 1958, Grant's peculiar focus on co-star Sophia Sophia Loren's footwear drew attention. He requested unusual close-ups, often reshooting scenes just to better frame her shoes. At first, it looked like a director's eye for detail. Then, it became something else. Grant reportedly kept shoe catalogs on set, not for wardrobe consultation, but personal interest. Between takes, he would flip through them, sometimes circling certain styles or commenting on particular shapes. Crew members said he would ask, only half joking, if certain pairs could be sourced for Sophia. His private correspondence hints at something deeper. Letters contain poetic phrases like poetic in stride and divinely arched, not about performance, but anatomy. He described ankles and insteps with the kind of admiration most reserved for eyes or lips. Years later, his films reveal an odd pattern, recurring shots of women's feet, sometimes entirely unrelated to plot. Maybe coincidence, or maybe Grant's subtle signature, hiding in plain sight. But the next actor's obsession was even stranger, and it shaped the way he saw people's faces forever. Marlon Brando was cinema's unpredictable genius, raw, emotional, and endlessly watchable. But few knew that one of his most personal fixations had nothing to do with performance. Brando had a deep, private obsession with nostrils. Not the whole face, not the voice, just nostrils. His diaries, discovered after his death, describe them in almost romantic language. One passage calls a woman's nostrils vulnerable gateways to emotion. Another links them to breath, life, and even seduction. It was not metaphor, it was desire. Close friends noticed too. Brando would compliment someone on how they breathe or the way their nostrils flare. During intimate moments, one former partner recalled, he would gently touch her nose and stare as she exhaled. On set, he sometimes requested camera angles that emphasized the face from below, highlighting nostrils in a way few others found natural. Directors assumed it was an artistic choice, but over time, the pattern became too specific to ignore. Biographer Peter Manso noted that Brando's casting decisions were occasionally based on subtle facial features, especially noses. While it seemed odd, for Brando, it was instinct, and the next actor's compulsion just as strange. Only this time, it lived inside a closet, quietly growing with every scene. Peter Lorre was never the leading man. He was the sinister whisperer, the haunted eyes, the nervous laughter. Whether playing a killer or a conniving sidekick, he left a mark that outlived his screen time. But off camera, the man behind those trembling voices had a secret hobby, one that even his closest friends struggled to explain. He collected women's clothing, not simply as keepsakes from wardrobe departments, not as souvenirs from films. Lorre kept specific garments, worn lingerie, slips, blouses, corsets, from actresses he admired or worked with, but not for fame or memory or even mischief. He called the pieces erotically theatrical. This phrase, both poetic and chilling, was not a one-time slip. According to his ex-wife, Celia Lovsky, Lorre described the feel of costume fabric as tied to performance, energy, and desire. In her memoirs, she claimed his bedroom closet looked less like a wardrobe and more like a costume vault, rows of women's clothing hanging neatly, sometimes tagged with scene numbers or character names. Lorre did not hide this from her. In fact, he spoke about it openly. He believed the garments carried emotional residue, as if the performance itself lingered in the fabric. For him, touching a silk blouse from a dramatic scene was like reliving the tension, the arousal, the fantasy. His home contained several locked drawers. Inside were gloves, stockings, and even undergarments labeled in his own careful handwriting. A particular set from the film Mad Love was kept under glass, displayed not as clothing, but as relics. To visitors, it was bewildering. To Lorre, it was sacred. What made this obsession even more unsettling was how it clashed with his public persona. The stuttering creep on screen was, in private, a man chasing something delicate, intimate but untouchable. He never crossed boundaries. He did not steal or harass, but he collected, meticulously and compulsively, as if building a shrine to femininity and fantasy. When asked once about his favorite role, he said, "I like scenes where you wear the emotion, like a coat." something that stays with the fabric. And yet, the next star on our list turned collecting into something even more personal, down to the very garments worn by her lovers. Tallulah Bankhead never cared for rules. She was loud, provocative, and impossible to ignore. Whether on Broadway or in film, she made sure every entrance counted. But what she kept hidden behind closed doors was not her voice, it was her collection. One so intimate and specific, it startled even her closest staff. She kept the underwear of her lovers. And not just a few forgotten pieces. Bankhead collected them deliberately. After romantic encounters, she would often keep the undergarments her partners left behind, or, in some cases, asked for them outright. Each pair was labeled, dated, and tucked away in a drawer that one housekeeper once described as a museum of mischief. That drawer was discovered by accident. A maid organizing the bedroom found over 100 pairs, each tagged with the name of the man or woman who wore them. Some labels were playful, others were deeply personal, but all of them formed a kind of diary that Tallulah never wrote in words. This was not a private shame. Bankhead spoke openly, but the underwear drawer remained a private ritual. To her, it was not trophy hunting. It was memory-keeping, intimacy, cataloged. Her way of owning the experience long after it had ended. Friends described how she would occasionally open the drawer during parties, not to show off, but to laugh, to reminisce. That one, she once said, while pointing to a silk pair, sang opera and cried when he left. Another time, she reportedly whispered, "That one nearly broke me." And though the act itself might seem outrageous, Bankhead's reasons were strangely tender. She once told a friend, "I do not keep photographs, I keep feelings. You cannot frame a night, but you can fold it away." Biographers later suggested the practice may have helped her deal with a string of short-lived, emotionally intense relationships. A form of archiving not pain, but connection, physical proof that something happened and that it mattered. And just when you think that is as strange as it gets, along came a woman who made her undergarments not just a keepsake, but a stage for power, even when no one could see them. Mae West never played small. She was bold when others were cautious, unapologetic when it was still dangerous to be. But what most people never realized was that her power did not come from her voice or her walk. It came from what she wore underneath it all, literally. Mae West had a deep, unwavering obsession with lingerie. To her, it was not just clothing, it was armor. She once said she could not fully perform unless she was wearing the exact undergarments she had chosen, no matter if they were visible or not. On set, she would stop production until her preferences were met. Corsets, garters, lace. Every layer mattered. She believed certain fabrics gave her presence. Without them, she felt diminished. Her costume designers often spoke of how detailed her requests were. Not just size and color, but material, stitching, and even the sound of the fabric when she moved. "It has to whisper," she once told a wardrobe assistant. "Not rustle, whisper." But the obsession did not stop at personal preference. Mae West went so far as to auction off her own lingerie, used, often autographed, and always styled to perfection. Fans paid handsomely, sometimes bidding thousands for a single item. It was more than memorabilia. It was access to her mystique, and she knew exactly what she was doing. West understood her public persona was built not just on innuendo, but on symbols. Slip, a corset, a garter belt. They were extensions of her voice, her gaze, her presence. Owning her lingerie meant owning a piece of her power, and she liked that idea. Privately, she spoke of lingerie as transformative. She kept dozens of sets, stored in velvet-lined drawers, each categorized by mood. "This one's for danger," she said, of a red satin ensemble. "This one's for mischief." She was known to wear specific pieces while writing, rehearsing, or negotiating contracts, believing they gave her edge. It may sound theatrical, even eccentric, but for Mae West, it was dead serious. In a world that tried to control women's bodies, she used silk and lace to take control back, quietly, strategically, sensually. And yet, the next star's fixation was not about what she wore. It was about what she had to wear, or else she could not become herself at all. Bette Davis had a stare that could slice through silence. Her characters were often sharp, defiant, and unforgettable. But behind that cinematic intensity was something fragile, something she only revealed through a peculiar, deeply personal fixation. She could not act without the right hat. Not just any hat, the right one. For every role, every scene, Davis insisted on a specific piece of headwear that completed her sense of identity. It was not about style or appearance, it was about presence. Without it, she claimed, she felt unfinished, as if she were playing someone else pretending to be the character. This attachment began early in her career, when a costume designer brought her a felt hat that made her feel, in her words, more myself than I had ever felt before. From that moment on, hats became more than props. They became emotional anchors. Directors often clashed with her over this habit. Some viewed it as difficult behavior, others saw it as genius. She would delay production if the hat felt wrong, even if no one else understood the difference. Sometimes she would bring her own, from a growing private collection that numbered in the hundreds. To Davis, hats were not accessories. They were rituals. She claimed that placing one on her head helped her hear the character. In a letter to a friend, she wrote, "A hat is not worn. It is absorbed. It decides how I speak, how I move, what I hide." Even off-camera, the connection lingered. Visitors to her home described walls lined with carefully arranged hats, some mounted like portraits. Each had a story. One was marked with a note. She lied to protect him. Another read, "This one never forgave herself." And in more private moments, friends said Davis would try them on alone, practicing lines or staring into mirrors in total silence. Some called it eccentric, others called it method, but no one denied it worked. Later in life, she described the practice in almost spiritual terms. "Some people pray, I wear hats. That is how I find her, whoever she is." But if Bette Davis built her characters with hats, the next legend built his fantasy with something far more physical. Boots that wrapped around the past and refused to let go. Errol Flynn was the swashbuckler of the silver screen, a dashing rogue with a sword at his hip and a smirk on his face. But behind the bravado, he carried a fixation that never quite made it into the scripts, an unshakable fetish for Victorian lace-up boots. Not cowboy boots, not riding boots, lace-ups. The kind worn tightly up the calf, often by women in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Flynn found them irresistible, and he made sure they appeared on set, even when they made no sense at all. Costume designers on multiple productions recalled the same pattern. Flynn would quietly request his female co-stars wear specific footwear. He would bring in reference photos, sometimes actual vintage pairs. One designer from Captain Blood said he showed her a boot with more reverence than any prop he ever held. But this was not just about visuals. Flynn wanted the boots laced a certain way. He wanted the sound they made on wooden floors. He asked that actresses rehearse walking in them so they moved just right. At times, he reportedly adjusted the laces himself before takes, claiming it was for continuity, though most understood better. The obsession followed him off-set. He was known to collect the boots worn during filming, calling them mementos. Some were kept in his personal library, others in glass cases. Friends described rooms where you could barely walk without seeing a pair, neatly arranged, polished, preserved, each one attached to a name, a moment, a memory. But Flynn's relationship with the boots went deeper than appearance. He reportedly believed they symbolized restraint, control, and elegance all at once. He once told a journalist, "A woman laced into her boots is halfway between danger and devotion." Stories later emerged from crew members who claimed Flynn would become visibly more engaged, more animated, when his co-stars wore the boots he favored. A quiet mood would lift, his performance sharpened, his charm returned, and the boots were never random. They reflected his fantasy, timeless, tightly bound, and always just out of reach. Yet while Flynn's fetish had to be worn to be seen, the next star held her secret even closer, tucked beneath the pillow, wrapped in metal and shimmering with misplaced devotion. Jean Harlow was Hollywood's original blonde bombshell, radiant, tragic, and endlessly imitated. Her screen presence was electric, but off-screen, she clung to something far more delicate. Not a person, not a habit, but a glittering enduring obsession with engagement rings, ones she never wore publicly but kept hidden beneath her pillow. Harlow received hundreds of gifts from fans, but it was the rings, particularly engagement rings, that held her attention. She did not care about their value. She rarely wore them, yet she kept each one, stored in velvet boxes beside her bed, rotating them nightly like ritual tokens. Friends and housekeepers recalled how she insisted on sleeping with at least one under her pillow, sometimes more. She believed the rings carried energy, protection, even luck. To outsiders, it seemed odd. But to Harlow, each ring represented something rare, the idea of being chosen, cherished, pursued. It was not the proposal that mattered, it was the symbolism, the gesture, the fantasy. Many of the rings came with handwritten notes, declarations of love from men she had never met. She never responded, but she never discarded them either. Her co-stars joked that she had more rings than MGM had cameras, yet she treated them with quiet reverence. She never showed them off, never bragged. When asked in interviews about her jewelry, she always redirected the question. The rings, it seemed, were not meant for the world. They were for her. Some believed the collection reflected a deeper yearning. Harlow's love life was notoriously troubled. Her first husband's death, string of failed relationships, and an endless parade of rumors left her guarded. But the rings allowed her to hold on to the idea of romance without the pain of reality. One confidant claimed she spoke to them, whispering thoughts before sleep. Another said she sometimes cried while holding them, believing they contained the pieces of a life she would never fully have. Even decades later, collectors found rings in her estate, with tags labeled only by emotion, hope, regret, almost. To the world, she was dazzling. But in the quiet hours, beneath the satin sheets, she clutched cold metal to feel something warm. And if Jean Harlow kept her secrets under a pillow, the final name on this list took hers to the skin, etched forever, but seen only by the few she trusted most.